A league-high 9 San Francisco 49ers have been selected to the Pro Bowl. I'm not surprised. I thought there may have been even more. But 9 total. And once again, as I feel like I say every year, broken record, beginning in 2019, 49ers have the best roster in the NFL. Is that good enough to win a Super Bowl? We'll find out. One more meaningless game, Week 18. They have the bye, and then the divisional round. 49ers, can you do it this year? Well, the Pro Bowl, it's not everything. It's not flat out a popularity contest, but it consists of a third. Well, players are selected by this way. A third of it is made up by a fan vote, then a third of it is from the players, and then a third is voted by the coaches. So fans, coaches, players decide who makes this team, and the game itself at one time was somewhat interesting. I would check it out when it was in Hawaii growing up, but then it became worse and worse, and now what you have is mini games. So what all it really is the honor at this point. I mean, the greatest honor being selected to the team of teams is the All-Pro team. That is the highest honor because it's the few and it's a very select group. But the Pro Bowl still means something to get that honor, to get that on your career record. So let's look at these players, and I'm going to go in order by those who have been to the most, to the least. Trent Williams, no surprise there. This is his 11th Pro Bowl. And each year he's been with the 49ers. It's been a Pro Bowl selection. Getting in 20, 21, 22, 23. He's the greatest offensive lineman who has suited up in a 49ers uniform. It's been 4 years. There's no one that's been better in at least the Super Bowl era. There has not been. Sure, Hall of Famer. I learned my lesson from last year. I did my rankings of the top 10 49ers for the season of 2022. And I put Trent Williams at number 2 behind Nick Bosa. And all due respect to Nick Bosa, last year we've learned that Trent Williams is the most valuable player on the team. I mean, just look at what happened when he was out. He was playing on one leg, basically, against the Browns, and you could say that Myles Garrett got the best of him in that game, but, you know, you're facing an all-pro defensive end on one leg, and I don't know if there's anyone more powerful than Myles Garrett at the position. They lose that game, then they lose the 2 he's just out the entire game for. The whole offense works because of him. The offensive line is average at best. Besides Trent Williams, the running game works because of him. He keeps Brock Purdy up, guarding his blind side at left tackle. He is the premier left tackle in football, still is, and he's one of the greatest left tackles in football history. Trent Williams, that's 11, a lock to be in the Hall of Fame. He should be an All-Pro as well. I expect 3 straight All-Pros for Trent Williams. How about Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback? He has earned 8 Pro Bowl selections now as a fullback. And I know fullbacks aren't what they used to be. There aren't as many as there used to be. Not every team has a fullback that they use. But when you have 8 fullback selections, you have to start thinking, well, maybe this guy is a Hall of Famer. This is 7 with the 49ers, 8 total. And he is one of the more valuable players to this team. He wouldn't be as valuable on another team, but he sure is valuable on this team. especially when you're considering what he does in the run game. You can use him as an extra tight end. He's just a super smart player, and a player that Kyle Shanahan loves. George Kittle. This is his 5th Pro Bowl. This is his 3rd 1,000-yard receiving season, his first since 2019. And Kittle is the best all-around tight end in football. He's not the best receiving tight end. I've always said he's the best and most dynamic tight end after the catch. And it confuses me. It frustrates me why he at times is not as involved in the passing game as he should be. In another team, he probably would. There's a reason for that, because he is an outstanding blocker, and the 49ers have their weaknesses and limitations on the offensive line. But Kittle, I love him because he is a complete tight end. He is one of the top receiving tight ends, but he at times is an extension of the offensive line. He's an excellent run blocker, a solid pass blocking tight end. And he is a tight end that could play when I began to start watching football in the 90s. He could be a tight end that is tough enough to play in any era. And I'm not necessarily trying to take a shot at Travis Kelce, but you look at Travis Kelce, he doesn't even register. I mean, last time I checked Pro Football Focus, he didn't even register as a blocker. He's just a glorified receiver, and a very good one at that. But George Kittle, what separates him is that he can play the traditional tight end position and do it all well. So that's 5 selections, and another player that you have to really give strong Hall of Fame consideration for as well. Nick Bosa. This gets his 4th, and every year he's been healthy, he's been a Pro Bowler. Not as good as he's been other years. I mean, I almost would make the argument this has been his, I would argue perhaps his weakest season. But he's still a great player. And some of that is because of the standard he's set of excellence. And everyone could have a little bit of an off year, yet he's still the best defensive player on this team. With all due respect to Fred Warner, he is the best defensive player on the 49ers. 2019 Defensive Rookie of the Year. 2020, of course, was a lost season. 21 came back even better. 22 Defensive Player of the Year, and still double-digit sack season this year. And he's had a heck of a great start to his career. Bosa is one of the best picks the 49ers have made with an early first-round pick in the team's history. I don't think it's too early to say that. He was groomed to rush the quarterback, all the attention that he gets, and it's just more than the sack numbers. He draws so much attention, and double teams and chips. He's a special player. Said you can throw out the 2020 season. He has been a top 3 edge rusher, at least defensive end. Really, every season since he's come in the league. 19, 21, 22, 23. And you're right at the top of PFF rankings for defensive ends. Fred Warner. The numbers would say for Fred Warner, I will say this is 3 for Fred Warner. So in review again, Trent Williams 11 for Trent Williams, Kyle Juszczyk 8, George Kittle 5, Nick Bosa 4, Fred Warner 3. Statistically, Fred Warner's having the best year of his career. I'll get more into the stats in another episode. But career high in interceptions, career high in passes defensed, career high in forced fumbles. his first half of the season was excellent, and I don't mean this to be a criticism. His second half was weaker, more missed tackles. He's just being tired, taking some poor angles, not wrapping up quite as much. But like Bosa, such a high standard he set, and he was just playing out of his mind in the first half. And he's the best off-ball linebacker in football. There are some other very good ones, like in Baltimore, with Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, his teammate, Dre Greenlaw, which we'll get to a little bit later. Fred Warner is nearly the perfect modern middle linebacker with sideline-to-sideline speed. He can go drop deep into coverage. He's very good, like Patrick Willis, very good at knocking the football out for a middle linebacker. And when needed, he can rush the quarterback. Three Pro Bowls, and I expect for him an All-Pro. I mean, I think George Kittle should get an All-Pro too. Nick Bosa will be hard to say. There's so many good edge rushers this year. And at defensive end, outside linebacker, I'm not sure he's going to get it. But Trent Williams, yes. George Kittle over Kelsey, I don't think he's going to get it, but he should. Fred Warner definitely should be All-Pro. Then Christian McCaffrey. Hard to believe only his third Pro Bowl selection. Big reason for that is health. You know, he's been, the good news for the 49ers is he's been very healthy here. And he has not had a history of good health. But he's been the best offensive player in the league. I know Lamar's had a very good end of the season. He's no doubt the best running back going in his prime, probably a tail end of his prime. I mean, over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. As a running back, this was his best season, over 5 yards a carry. Still an excellent receiver. Actually not as used as much as receiver. He was used more as a running back because you have so many weapons. And that's one of the factors with the 49ers on offense is sometimes there's just not enough balls to get around to everybody. These guys could have had bigger statistical seasons on other teams when you're talking about Kittle or McCaffrey, Ayuk, Debo. But this may be the type of season that you look back at and say, well, this is what made him a Hall of Famer. It's an uphill battle, though, as a running back. There's certain players that get in that I don't think should have got in. I mean, I love Terrell Davis. Too short of a career. I mean, outstanding. You know, we can't forget his performance in the Super Bowl. Yes. Too short, in my opinion. You have to say, well, is it about excellence over a short period of time, that's super prime, or is it about longevity? I think he needs another big season to be a Hall of Fame player, but that's another conversation for another time, really. Currently, he's the best running back in the game over these last two seasons. Javon Hargrave. This is his second Pro Bowl selection. This is the one that surprised me. He didn't make the impact I thought he would make this year. I'm not saying he was bad. I'm not saying he was a disappointment. But he was the number one free agent on defense. He got a huge contract. And I'd say of the two that were most valuable between Armstead and Hargrave, while they were both in there at the same time, I think Armstead made a bigger impact. He's definitely better in the run game than Hargrave. Hargrave's very good at pushing the pocket, and he got sacks. I mean, he was a good statistical year, but it seemed like he cleaned up on sacks, or because Nick Bosa was getting doubled, or Nick Bosa got a big push that Hargrave ended up getting the sack, maybe instead of Bosa or someone else. He's average against the run. I like him. I don't believe he was a Pro Bowler. Not to me, he wasn't. Brock Purdy. First Pro Bowl selection. He had more Pro Bowl votes by the fans than anyone else. What can you say about him? He's at the top of the league with completion percentage, passer rating, quarterback rating. He's the first 49ers quarterback to be selected to the Pro Bowl since Jeff Garcia. That has been how bad we've had it in San Francisco. You had Joe Montana, Steve Young, who set the gold standard. No one had better quarterback play between two quarterbacks back-to-back. Except for Favre and Rodgers. At that point in history, no one had it better than Joe Montana and Steve Young. And then you had Jeff Garcia, who was very good. Multiple Pro Bowls. But for 20 years in the passing era, and for the 49ers not to have a Pro Bowl quarterback was embarrassing. Because it's not that hard to have a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, we're saying this is a great honor, but because of all the alternates, we even have an alternate Pro Bowl quarterback. But Purdy just wins. He wins. I could go on a long time about Purdy with all that he's achieved this year, but most passing yards in the history for 49ers quarterback. He was the first to crack 30 touchdowns since Jeff Garcia. And he did in a 16-game season. And we need to get rid of the 17th game. Of course, it's not going to happen. It was important he did that in the 16-game season. Means a little more than just piling it on with a 17th game. But from being the last pick in the draft in 2022, the next year as a full-time starter, he's a Pro Bowl quarterback, and he was in the MVP discussion. I mean, you should still be in the MVP conversation. Seems like it's going to be Lamar Jackson's award. What else could you ask from Brock Purdy? He really only had one bad game, and that was against the Ravens. He had some bad quarters in some of the other games, like the Vikings. But we no longer have a team that's carried by its defense. We have a team that is a modern NFL team with an offense that scores. And we put up 42 points on the Cowboys and the Eagles, and that was never going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo. He can win on the road. He can win in the big games. His pocket presence, his awareness, anticipation, reading defenses, vision, going through his progressions, accuracy. Those are the most important things for a quarterback. Arm strength is great, yes. But I'd rather have those other things, and you can win with those other abilities. And then the other first-timer is Charvarius Ward. And what a great second half. Great all-around season, but a great second half by Ward. First-time Pro Bowler, great signing from the Chiefs. Second season with the 49ers. I mean, he's just done the job against the best receivers that have been put out there against him. And I'm very confident in him at a time that it's so difficult to play corner. We have a very good number one corner, and he's been criticized for not having enough ball skills. Well, we saw the increase in interceptions and big play ability and shutting guys down. He's the third best player on this defense. Nick Bosa 1, Fred Warner 2, Charvarius Ward 3. So before wrapping up, have to mention two other players. And the snub would be Brandon Ayuk. There aren't very many receivers selected, and the competition was very stiff. He should have gotten it instead of Evans. Evans is very good. But Ayuk, I mean, just think about if he was on a team that passed the ball more. He would have put up bigger numbers, more impressive numbers. But with all the balls that have to go around San Francisco, I mean, he's surpassed Deebo. He's a much better receiver than Deebo Samuel. And on offense, when you're considering skilled position players, he's the second best only to Christian McCaffrey. I mean, quiet, just gets the job done. Not flashy, but he's a very smooth player, a professional player. He just does everything well. He runs routes well. He has good hands. He has enough speed. He has enough size. There's not one quality that stands out above the rest. He just does everything well, and he's a total pro. He should have got in. To me, Hargrave should not have got in. Then there was a lot of talk about, well, did Dre Greenlaw get snubbed? And to me, no. I really like Greenlaw, but he had an inconsistent season. I think it was injuries was part of it. He plays with such intensity that he really puts himself out there to get injured. And sometimes I wish he would, can I say, bring it back a notch. You don't have to be that intense all the time. You don't have to be lighting someone up at every play. He had a better season last year. If he was going to be a Pro Bowler, I thought last year was the year. But he does have a very important role in this defense. He's the intimidator. He is a great complement to Fred Warner. It's not that Fred Warner doesn't deliver big hits, but Fred Warner plays further back. He plays more in coverage, while Greenlaw just punishes running backs, and he is a real presence out there, and he is a tone setter, unlike anyone else on the defense. Very good player, Pro Bowler, not this year. So those are my thoughts on the 9 Pro Bowl selections for the 49ers, and then the 2 that were up for possible Pro Bowlers. And I'm not even going to get into the alternates.